move-outs this month. But
If you're all ready, we'll go ahead and start. I think we're ready back there. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you here. This is the Salina City Planning Commission, and we'll begin today with approval of minutes from our last meeting. Did you all have a chance to read them?
I move we approve the minutes as written.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as written. All those in favor vote aye, please.
aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to new business for this evening. Our first public hearing item is number 3.1, application CU 19-5, filed by Deborah Porter, requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a group daycare home to be established. Ma'am, you can wait. We'll have some comments from staff, and then we'll hear from you. And operated in an R1 single-family residential district, and that property is located at 817 East Elm Street.
Thank you, Chair and Commission. The location of this proposed conditional use permit is on the north side of Elm and is highlighted by the blue border that you see on the overhead screen for the aerial photograph. The applicant is Deborah Porter, and she currently has a licensed daycare home that she operates from this location from her residence, and she is looking to expand that licensed daycare to a group daycare classification. And in doing that, it requires a conditional use permit and a public hearing with this body so that approval of the additional 2 kids, going from 10 children to 12 children, can be accommodated by the property, as well as an additional care provider. Because when you have a group daycare home, there is a secondary employee that comes onto the site to help care for the children. These rules are established by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and locally they are enforced by the Saline County Health Department. Planning Division's role, and your role in this case, is to look at the property and the proposed conditional use permit for the group daycare home to see if it fits and meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance, as well as what kind of negative impacts it may or may not have on the surrounding neighborhood. So with that, we'll look at the compliance with the zoning regulations and requirements. So the R1 district has regulation requirements in terms of what we call bulk regulations, which is our setbacks, our lot coverages, things of that nature, as well as off-street parking requirements for a group daycare home. So here is an aerial photo that we've kind of dressed up to a site plan, and you'll see we have that same blue boundary border that shows the property boundaries, as well as the red lines which show the distances or setbacks that we're dealing with. So we have a flag-shaped lot where we have a 10 by 50 kind of finger coming off to the alley on the north side of the property. But aside from that, the property is 65 feet wide by 150 feet deep. And the front yard setback here is 27 feet, while the side yards are 12 and a half and 19 feet deep, and the rear yard setback is 77 feet. So 77 feet from the back of the property or back of the building structure all the way to the rear property line. The driveway itself is a 2-car wide driveway. It has crushed rock and gravel type surfacing, and it is 19 feet deep, and it goes back 52 feet. So you could accommodate up to 4 vehicles fairly easily in that driveway. The welfare and convenience of the public, the applicant states that the proposed group daycare home will allow her to provide a safe and healthy place for children in the area. And in looking at that, the health department, the fire department, and building services all inspected the property leading up to this hearing, and concluded that it does meet all of the safety requirements and building code and fire code requirements for a group care facility for daycares. And staff believes that permitting this group daycare home in the proposed location could contribute to the welfare and convenience of families that live within the Oakdale School District area. Looking at injury to the surrounding properties, the applicant states the property will be kept and maintained free of hazards to prevent injury, and that she has been operating as a licensed daycare provider at this location for 2 years and has been in good standing with the health department and would continue to work towards that end. Staff would also note that she previously had a conditional use permit that was approved by the Planning Commission for a group daycare home at her previous address, which was 603 North 10th. And that decision by the Planning Commission was done in June of 2011. So she has previously had a group daycare home at a previous residence in a previous location. The primary difference when we look at going from a licensed daycare home to a group daycare home is, again, that there's 2 additional children and that additional care provider that the state requires for that type of a group daycare. Staff would agree that from the outside, there's going to be very little perceivable changes. The biggest change that you probably might see is additional traffic, which we'll get into when we deal with parking here in a moment. And the entire backyard is fenced in with a 6-foot tall privacy fence, and that's where the children play and have their play area. So from just an onlooker going by, I don't think there's much of a perceived difference between a licensed daycare and a group daycare home in this instance. Now, with that said, staff did receive some comments from a concerned neighbor, and that neighbor, who is located just directly to the west at 815 East Elm, is opposed to the group daycare home and is concerned that the applicant already has 8 kids, and he hears her yelling at them all the time, is what he says, and that if she cannot control 8 kids without raising her voice, he doesn't believe that she needs any more. And the neighboring property owner also thinks that the proposed daycare home will create additional traffic and noise, and that the applicant has rabbits, some loose and some caged, and he's concerned about their presence and what kind of impact it has on the children. And so that's something that has been voiced as a concerned citizen or a concerned neighbor that you could have as something to keep in mind when you make your decision. And looking at the domination of the neighborhood, the applicant states that no changes will be made to the property and that none are planned. And the surrounding property does consist of other single-family residential dwellings. Most of these buildings were built in the 1910s. We do not have actual building permit records of when exactly the structures or in particular the applicant's building was constructed, but we know it was probably in the early 1900s is what we suspect. Looking at off-street parking, and this usually is a big deal when we're talking about group daycare homes, is making sure that we have sufficient off-street parking and that we're not impacting the neighborhood adversely by introducing a lot of traffic that the property is not able to handle. So again, we do have a parking driveway that is able to accommodate 4 vehicles. 2 are required for the residents. A third is required for the care provider who will be coming to assist the applicant, and a 4th is always preferred so that you have an off-street loading and loading area for children, but is not required by code. In this case, we do have the 4 so that we do have 2 parking stalls for the residents, 1 for a care provider, and a 4th for loading and loading children off of the street. With that said, Elm Street is a local street, and although it may have a little bit higher traffic counts than other local streets, it's not a collector or arterial street, so if some curbside drop-offs are necessary, that shouldn't be an issue. Again, we do have the neighbor who does have some concerns about the noise and traffic, but from staff's perspective, looking at this as we do any other conditional use permit, having 4 off-street parking spaces is usually a good thing to have. So with that, we do have a few comments. We have the fact that the care provider has been operating at this location for 2 years and has been in good standing. We have the fact that the property has been inspected by the fire department, the county health department, and building services, and meets all of the requirements for a daycare facility. And we have the fact that we do have adequate off-street parking and a fenced-in play area to the north of the structure. So those are all positives that we feel could be good findings for approving the conditional use permit. So your alternatives are you could approve the conditional use permit if you find it finds all the findings or meets all the findings and meets and adheres to all the zoning ordinance regulations with or without any conditions. You could postpone a decision if you feel additional information is needed, or you could deny the applicant's request if you feel that it could cause injury to the surrounding properties and area. We do have one suggested condition that we typically put on a group daycare home, and that is that no more than 12 children may be cared for at any one time in accordance with state standards for group daycare homes. That is a state standard, and so it's not necessary. It's not a necessary condition, although we do like to have it on there just as a reminder for the applicant that if you were to approve this conditional use permit, that 12 is the maximum that is allowed. And with that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hers. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff? Commissioner Baffa?
Does that 12 children include family members?
It can if they're children. I mean, it's 12 children total. So, I mean, and there's a point system that the state has, and so infants count as more than somebody over 18 months old. But the applicant can speak a little more to what her goals are.
Other questions? Ms. Porter? I need you to give your name and address, please.
My name is Deborah Porter, and I'm the resident of 817 East Elm.
Thank you. Would you like to make comments?
As far as the gentleman, my neighbor next door, honestly, I didn't know that my property went back behind his house. And he does have a bunch of stuff there, which I'm okay with him keeping there. I have no reason to make him move that. I do have references from families and pictures to prove that the children are not walking around in rabbit feces. If you would like to see those, I can go over them with you if you'd like. And I also have parents here to speak on my behalf too.
Thank you. Let's see if the commissioners have questions for you specifically. Ladies and gentlemen? No? Then I think we're good. Would anyone else like to speak?
This is Jessica.
Okay, Jessica, if you would please give me your name and address, please.
My name's Jessica Robison. I'm at 1323 Kiowa Avenue.
Thank you.
I've, in her behalf, Debbie Porter's behalf, I've had my Luca, who's, she's my granddaughter, but I've raised her since she was a month old, 7 years old now almost, and she's been with Debbie the entire time. And I've never had issues with Debbie yelling. You know, I don't mind that anyway, because she's got to, got to know who's boss sometimes. But she's always wanting to return to Debbie Porter's house during the summer and after school. So I don't have a problem with her returning there, and I've never seen anything, crazy rabbits or whatever there is running around. She's always loved it over there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for speaking. Is there anyone else? Hello. I just need your name and address, please.
Melody Radden. I live at 807 North 4th.
Did you get the name? Melody?
Melody Radden.
Radden, R-A,
DDEN.
thank you.
Okay. My son Hunter has been going there since he was a year and a half old. He's almost 7 next month. And Harmony has been going there since she was a year and a half also, almost 2 probably. Never had any issues, never had yelling or they always want to go back. Hunter used to hide his socks and shoes so he didn't have to leave her house. Harmony wants to go on my day off and not be with mommy because she wants to go to Debbie's. I've never had any issues with yelling or rabbits. I think the rabbits are caged. So, yeah, I've never had any issues. They love it there. And they're like family there, so.
Thank you very much. Hello. I think you know I need your name and address. Perfect.
My name is Rebecca Hole, Hoel.
Thank you.
And I live at 737 Fairdale. Melody introduced me to Debbie when I suddenly got a job and I needed somebody to watch my son, who is 7 years old and a high-functioning autism. He generally distrusts people and does not like to be around people. His first day, I picked him up from Debbie's. He automatically said, yes, I want to go back. And I just talked with him last night. He says, Debbie doesn't yell. He wishes they could play with the rabbits, but the kids aren't allowed back there with the rabbits. And when I pick up my son, it's very rare, usually to save on traffic. Melody picks up my son for me, and I pick him up from her house.
Thank you very much. Are you speaking?
She's Rachel, she's your next one.
Oh, okay. Well, good to know.
She'll speak for me, too.
I think we're good.
She
That
used
we-
to work for another place that came to my home.
Well, we had quite a commercial already, so I think we're good. This is a public hearing, though, if there's anyone else that would like to speak. And if not, then are there questions for anyone that did speak from the commission? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much, ladies. Commissioners, questions? Certainly.
I move we approve application CU 19-5, with the condition that no more than 12 children may be cared for at any one time.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application CU 19-5 with the condition that no more than 12 children may be cared for at any one time in accordance with state standards of group daycare homes. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Porter. Thank you, ladies.
So Deborah,
Okay, that's good. We like to have people here.
so Deborah, with a conditional use permit, it doesn't need to go to the city commission unless it were to be petitioned by the neighboring properties, in which case it would go to the city commission for final decision. If in a 14-day period we don't receive a petition, which would be basically 2 weeks from today, then the planning commission's decision becomes final and your conditional use permit is officially approved.
Thank you.
I forgot to address this question. Our state regulations say that related children 11 years and older do not count on our numbers for childcare. I don't have any.
You need to go to the mic.
Yeah, we're going to need you, Ms. Porter, to address this from the mic, please.
So restate
that-
all that, please.
To address your question that you had for him, the state regulations say that children 11 years old or older related to the provider or do not count on the numbers of children that we have. I currently don't have anyone that's 11 or younger or older than 11 in my area that is related to me. They all live in Hayes, so I will not have any extra kids on the property.
I was just concerned that if you brought in 12 and you have 8 already, that's 20 kids.
Well,
That's-
the thing is the state regulations also require, I am a licensed provider for 10 children, but between the school, 2 weeks before school and up to 2 weeks after school, we are licensed to have 12 children. And I currently have all 12 of those children. He just said that there was 8 because that's usually what is outside playing at the time when he's out there. I have already had the 12 children because licensing allows me to have that during the school year. The ladies that spoke, those are the children who go to school that I would have had to lose if I was not able to get the permit that you guys allow me to get. And it would not only break my heart, but it would break theirs too. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Application 3, or item 3.2 is application CU 19-6, filed by Rachel Jury, also requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a group daycare home to be established in an R1 district. This is on property located at 1714 Beach Street in Salina, Kansas.
Thank you. So our last meeting, the theme was special use permits and open air markets, and this week, our meeting theme is conditional use permits for group daycare homes. So this is a very similar application, and it does have a residential property, an R1 property that's similar to the last item that we looked at, and you can see that property highlighted here on the screen. And it is a single-family home that Rachel Jury, the applicant, is seeking to go from a licensed daycare to a group daycare home. And again, that takes you from 10 children to 12 children, and it requires an additional care provider. So looking at the compliance with the zoning ordinance requirements, their property is required to meet all of their zoning setbacks and off-street parking requirements. In this case, we have a 8,280 square foot lot that is 69 feet north to south and 120 square feet east to west. The side yard setbacks both meet or exceed 7.5 feet. The front yard setback, which is actually to the east along Beach, is 27 feet, which exceeds the 25-foot requirement. And the rear setback exceeds the 25-foot setback requirement with a 67-foot setback. Looking at the welfare and convenience of the public, the applicant states that the proposed group daycare home will allow her to provide a safe and healthy place for children in the area. The health department, fire department, and building services and planning staff all visited the site and conducted our inspection and concluded that it does meet all of the requirements for a daycare facility. And it is the belief of staff that having a group daycare home at this setting could provide additional care for families who have children in the Sunset School area. Looking at the injury of the surrounding properties, the applicant has been operating a licensed daycare from this facility from her residence since August of 2018 and has done so in compliance with the Kansas Department of Health, as well as meeting all of the life safety requirements and not having any issues with any of the neighbors. And staff agrees that from the outside, when you drive by, as with many group daycare homes, it's going to look the same as it does currently as a licensed daycare home. It'll be imperceptible as to how many children are actually inside being cared for in the backyard. The backyard is a fenced-in area with a 4-foot chain link fence that goes around the perimeter with a 6-foot privacy fence on the north property line. The play area is actually segregated in this particular case from the rest of the yard. So what we're seeing here is the main backyard, and there's a fence that's kind of difficult to pick up in the photograph that runs here, and that is for a 25 by, if we can go to the aerial photo, John, or that site plan map, 20 feet by 58 feet. So this is the fence that you kind of see there, and then there's a gate here that gets you into the house and into the play area. But this is a segregated play area that's specifically for the children, and that's where all their toys and outdoor activities are conducted. In looking at dominance or domination of the neighborhood, the applicant states the property will appear as it does today. All of the properties around this are single-family homes built in the mid to late 1950s. And so the applicant's property certainly fits within the context of the existing neighborhood, and without any changes being made to the structure of the property, there shouldn't be any perceivable change that occurs with the conditional use permit. Off-street parking, again, you're required to have 3 off-street parking spaces, 2 for the residents that live at the property, as well as 1 for the additional care provider. In this case, we do have a double-wide driveway that's 27 feet deep and a single-car garage, which gives us a 3rd off-street parking space. That meets the off-street parking needs, and Beach Street is a local street, and what happens is the applicant, if there isn't a space here, the parents who are loading and unloading children drop them off at the curb in front of the house so that they can go into the house and be in their daycare environment. The staff analysis for this is that we do have a daycare provider, again, that is already a licensed daycare provider, has been in good standing and for almost a year now at this particular location. The building has been inspected by the health department, fire department, and building services, and meets all of the requirements of a daycare facility, and has adequate off-street parking in a local street that is not heavily traveled. So, as with the last one, conditional use permits do run with the land. They're not subject necessarily to the individual who owns or operates the facility, but you could make it non-transferable if you choose to. That's not typically what's done in a daycare conditional use hearing, because what we're doing is we're really looking at the site more than we are the care provider, and is the site adequate, and if the site is adequate for this care provider, it's assumed that it would be acceptable for any other care provider. So your alternatives are you could approve the application for the daycare home with or without any conditions. You could postpone if additional information is needed, or you could deny the applicant's request for approval of a conditional use permit for a daycare home if you feel it could cause injury to the surrounding area in the neighborhood. We do have the same condition of approval that we suggested on the last item, that no more than 12 children be cared for at any one time in accordance with the state standards for group daycare homes. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hers. Commissioners, are there questions? No? Ms. Jury, it's your turn.
My name is Rachel Jury, and I live at 1714 Beach.
Thank you. Would you like to make comments?
I don't have any necessarily.
And you've operated for 10 months?
Yes, since August.
And we, I assume, did not receive any kind of feedback from neighbors?
This
of any
one we
kind?
have not received any feedback on.
So yeah, all my neighbors seem really friendly. They say hi to the kids, everything, and I've got they have their dogs, and they will come over and they'll tell the dogs the kids the dogs' names, and they don't have access to them because they're far enough away. But everybody seems to be really friendly about it and not have any problems at all. So none that have been expressed to me, anyways.
Okay. Any other questions or anything? Nope. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else want to speak? We're good? Okay, perfect. Then we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do you have questions or comments? When we do these, do we ascertain how many daycares are in a locale or in a specific area, or are there some kind of limitations on how many there are, within a radius, or?
We get a list from the health department on how many daycares there are. And so we do have a list, but we've never actually mapped it out in terms of this geographic region is low or doesn't have sufficient daycare. What I can tell you, just from personal anecdotal experience, is it's hard to find good daycare. And so I don't know that we have an over proliferation of daycare, if that's a concern.
I just wondered if they're occurring in specific areas in the city, or if it's fairly widespread, or if people came forward with applications for permits, if we would have more, if people would have more complaints in specific areas, for example, you know. Is that a question you can answer?
Okay, so the job I had before this was working for the Resource and Referral Agency for Childcare Providers. So we actually know where they're all at in Salina, and the closer you get to grade schools, you're going to see clusters of childcare providers. I know in my area where I'm at, there's not a ton right
But
there.
you're close
you
to
get,
Sunset.
But you get closer to Sunset, and there's probably a good 1, 2, 3, 4 providers over there that I'm aware of. So yeah, you can kind of see as you get closer to the schools, you're going to see those larger groupings of childcare
And is that the
providers.
same, do you think, for all the grade schools? Meadowlark, all Oakdale, all of them?
Yeah, because she's over in the Oakdale area, and there's a,
I can,
but,
You'll need to come up to the mic,
yeah,
please.
let me see.
No, you're okay. You can both share if you
do I
want.
need to say my
No,
name and all
no,
that?
no,
Okay.
we've got
Okay,
that.
so I know that in my area, within 3 blocks, there are 2 other child cares, and we're all friends, and you know, hey, we refer each other's to kids when we know we have openings. But with the new state regulations, we have to do the fingerprinting and stuff right now, which I'm totally fine with. There are a lot of providers that are quitting because they just can't afford the extra fees. So we are losing a lot of good providers. So, I don't know.
Well, I appreciate what you do. It's important to our community, and we all, I think, agree with that. So, anyway, did we vote on this? Not yet. No. Did I have a motion? No. That would be wonderful.
Okay.
I've forgotten where I was.
Okay. I move that we approve application CU 19-6, subject to the condition of not having more than 12 children cared for.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application CU 19-6 with the requirement of having no more than 12 children at any one time. If there's no discussion, all those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Do you have comments for the applicant, or? I'll let
Sorry.
you take that moment to do
Yes,
that.
thank you.
You're
For
welcome.
reminding me. So as with Ms. Porter's conditional use permit, it is subject to a petition by the neighbors, and if there is a petition against the approval of the conditional use permit, then it would go on to the city commission. Otherwise, if we get through a 14-day protest period without any protest, then the planning commission's decision is final, and we will be sending you a letter to that effect of your approval. We do not mail it out to the neighborhood, we'll just send it to you.
Well, they've had their chance. Yeah.
And if he wants to be mean about it, I can tell him to get his stuff off my property that I just found out that he
But
had
we
his
need to
stuff off
clarify,
my
we
property.
sent letters before this meeting.
Well, that is
their
why we
chance.
have
They don't-
bodies
they don't
like
get another
us.
chance.
To try to moderate these things. Thank you, ladies. Okay, this is not a daycare item. We've finished our public hearing items. We have no legislative items. Our administrative item is item 3.3, which is application PDD 84-1-1A, filed by the Manchester Manor Homeowners Association. requesting approval of proposed amendments to the bylaws and declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Manchester Manor Townhomes PDD. It's hard to
Thank
say.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Manchester Manor.
If you've driven down Ohio Street and you've looked over at the east side of the street, and there's a block section there where there's a solid wood fence that faces the street. Behind that solid wood fence is a cluster townhome development that is really oriented more towards Manchester Road, hence the name Manchester Manor. And it also has units that face Martin. What you will see here is that this is the plan that the Planning Commission approved in 1985. But if you drive by there today, you will see that there is a medical office building there. Those townhomes were never built, and that is currently the site of a medical clinic at the corner of Republic and South Ohio. For the portion that was built, it had common area, which consists of private access drive, swimming pool, and common open space. And to address that, there were articles of incorporation, bylaws, and a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They have a fairly high functioning homeowners association that consists of 19 members, and they are proposing to amend their bylaws and covenants to clarify several things, including fiscal year for the association and staggering the terms of members and officers. It's something that the city does with its boards and commissions. It's not desirable to have all of the board members go off at one time and then try to replace them all. So they have moved towards having staggered terms for that so they can have maintain some continuity. And they are, rather than having a strict date for their annual meeting, they've amended to provide some flexibility. So all of these are really private decisions as to how the board functions, but nonetheless, when there are common areas to be maintained and we're dealing with planned development districts, many of the covenants have a provision that says the bylaws shall not be amended or modified in any manner without the prior approval of the Planning Commission or governing body of the City of Salina. And so the purpose of having you review this is just to make sure that the associations are not amending their bylaws or covenants to try to terminate or transfer responsibility for maintenance. And in this case, these are procedural, not substantive changes. And because these are all internal matters and do not affect any public interest, we would recommend that by motion, the Planning Commission approve the proposed modifications to the bylaws, declaration of covenants, conditions, restrictions at today's meeting. We have a copy of the changes attached and read, as well as just information showing you the layout for how this is set up. We do have representatives of the Homeowners Association here if you have any questions, but we view these changes as primarily procedural and internal, and they don't really have any impact on the public.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. Questions? I see you still have the job. Thank you. You're going to have it forever.
Not letting him go.
Okay. It's probably wise. I'm sure you have something you'd like to tell us. Introduce yourself, please, for those that don't know you.
I am Jim Holder. I live at 934 Manchester. With me is our president, Sherry Wagner. She lives at 1100 Martin. I serve on the board and as treasurer. I have a background in management and administration, and I've worked on a number of bylaws, drafting, and policy manuals and all that kind of stuff. So I got kind of roped in again. 3 years ago, we went through the same thing.
Yes, I remember.
Owen remembers that.
We were here.
Okay. My first comment is, we have 20 units in the townhome. 19 of them have approved these amendments positively. One individual has not given a negative response, but has declined to sign the approval. Not verbally, but had just passed up the opportunity to sign it. So we have a 95% approval of these amendments. The first item on the amendment has to do with fiscal year. We have been practicing that since it was approved in, I don't know, around 1985, somewhere along in there. Because the budget year has always been calendar year, we have a state report that goes to the Secretary of State and a report that goes to the IRS that's required on the calendar year. But nowhere in our documents has it said our fiscal year is anything. So we think our fiscal year should match our report year, and so we'd like to have it be the calendar year. The second item has to do with annual meetings. Our current document says that our annual meeting shall be held on the second Thursday of January each year, rain, shine, snow, freeze, whatever. Several of our residents have been there 15, 20, 30 years. A majority range from probably 65 to 95. January is a bad time for people of that age to be exposed to travel to a meeting. We don't have facility large enough, so we use a neighborhood church at First Baptist Church most of the time, which is about 3 or 4 blocks away. So we have proposed in this amendment to allow the board to schedule the meeting sometime between January 1 and April 30, which allows for much better weather and the opportunity for the older people, if they want, to get out, thumb a ride or something to attend a meeting. And so all of our, or as I say, 95% have approved this. The next 2 items have to do with board member term of office and officer term of office. Under present operations, the term of office begins at the close of the annual meeting in January. By the adoption of the new schedule for annual meetings, it may be stretched depending when the annual meeting is. And the board members and the officers would begin their term of office at the close of the annual meeting, whenever it might be scheduled, between January 1 and April 30. So board members may or may not serve a full 3 years, and officers may or may not serve a 1-year term, depending on how the annual meetings are scheduled. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Holder.
any questions?
Any questions? No, but we learned a lot.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you all.
Wagner, for
Appreciate your
coming.
time.
We appreciate it. And we need a motion, I assume?
Yeah, we're looking for a recommendation that the planning commission approve the proposed modifications to the bylaws and declarations of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And you do that by motion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed amendments to the bylaws and declarations of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for Manchester Manor Townhomes PDD. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much for being here.
And I'll let you know when these get to go to the city commission, which will just be a follow-up action to this, but I'll keep you informed on that schedule. So.
Have a good evening.
I do have one comment. That facility is very well maintained. I'm in that area a lot, and it's aged very well, and it's meticulously maintained. Well, I can tell.
Yeah. That brings us to preliminary discussion items, of which we have none.
We have none.
Unfinished business?
Just a couple things of unfinished business. There's a reminder that's gone out from the city clerk's office. I was told that we had something like 70 openings on our various city advisory boards and commissions, and that 42 names in with expressions of interest. On this particular commission, Mr. Lenkowitz and Mr. Story's terms will expire at the end of August. Mr. Lenkowitz is eligible to be reappointed. Mr. Story is term limited out. And so
How could that be?
he is not eligible for reappointment. However, if you have friends, relatives, neighbors, acquaintances, we would encourage you to encourage them to explore boards and commissions that they might be interested in serving on, and then to get an expression of interest into that to the clerk's office. I can recall reviewing Mr. Baffa's expression of interest, where he listed about 4 or 5 different boards or commissions that he would be interested in serving on. And so people who have multiple interests can mark multiple boards if they are interested in those. So just something to be thinking about, just because August will creep up before we know it, and the clerk's office asked me to put a plug in to have people talk to their neighbors, friends, and encourage them to serve if they are interested in. As to the rest of the commission, there won't be any change in any status except for Mr. Lenkowitz and Mr. Story. And if Greg wants to be reappointed, he needs to let the clerk's office know. And if he doesn't wish to be reappointed, then he should let the clerk's office know. So, and then we will be meeting on June the 18th. And just a piece of information I thought that we would pass along, the Stone Lake subdivision, which is out at the corner of Schilling and Ohio. The original developer there was the owner who developed the sand pit out there and was actually the sand pit operator. He has now sold the remaining lots out there to local builders. And so we have had a little bit of that started out very slowly, but we are just about to the point that all the interior lots there are being built on. And so there is an interest out there in doing additional phases. But on the 18th, we've got a rezoning request and a plat for property on Beverly Drive west of Broadway. If you're not familiar with that area, you could drive that street before the meeting, and then we'll hopefully come back and discuss signs in the right-of-way again. So those are the two main items there, and then I think our final item is, as I understand it, Katie has graduated, and she should tell the commission what her plans are post-high school. So we'll ask Katie to give you an update.
I'm attending K-State University next year, and I'm majoring in biomedical engineering. So.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
We have really enjoyed your presence here, and good luck, yes.
So
Really
the Creighton
exciting.
T-shirts just to throw us off. Huh?
Yeah, that was my first option for college, but then I looked at the price tag, so. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the real world. Well, good luck.
So
It's a great school.
Yeah.
we will be here again in 2 weeks then.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Is there any rules, regulations about parking lot maintenance?
There is, and we just had a discussion about that today. We have a commercial plans reviewer, and they have been delegated. The ones that were in conversation today were over by Galaxy Center, Midstate, and particularly the Central Mall, are all getting contacts and trying to develop a compliance schedule and a plan to get some of the larger potholes repaired and patched and fixed up, because some of those are reaching hazardous levels. And so we have assigned a staff person who is doing that. It's actually, there is a provision in the zoning ordinance that requires those with paved parking lots to adequately maintain those, and there are potential consequences if they do not. But we've had good luck in the past with Midstate Plaza. There's portions of their lot are really good, portions have not been so good at the south end, and Central Mall is particularly troublesome, and we do get comments, complaints about that. But even some of the smaller commercial sites, it was not a great winter for freeze-thaw and some other things. So there's probably more deterioration, particularly of asphalt lots, than usual.
Behind Cadova.
Yes, that was one that was brought up today. So we have, like I said, we have a dedicated staff person that's addressing those and going out and doing site visits. And if you have one that's a particular concern and you want to email that in to us or call it in, let us know, and we'll make sure we look into that. But Cadova, Galaxy Center, the Midstate, and Central Mall were ones we discussed earlier today.
And then the same goes for parking lot landscaping. Some of it is in pretty,
Yes. And it's a little sad and a little surprising given the abundant moisture, but we have actually had a number of trees that when we go around there are, and it's disappointing that we have to let the business know that they have a dead tree, but that is our responsibility, and that again falls into the same. It's maybe not as much of a health and safety concern, but nonetheless, there's an obligation to maintain parking lots, and there's an obligation to maintain and replace landscaping.
and then same thing with irrigation systems that leak onto the parking lots.
Well, yes, it's an and sometimes we can identify that, sometimes we can't. One of the things that we have learned over the years is when a new manager takes over a store, the last thing that they are informed or educated about is their irrigation system. So, for instance, we've been working with CVS Pharmacy to get their landscaping back up to where it should be. They installed an irrigation system. It was not working. And so that was part of that. One out at Office Max and Goodwill, I think they didn't drain it down for the winter. It froze and broke. So in many cases, things are set up to succeed, but the people who are managing or new people managing are not always informed or educated about what they have. So sometimes the store manager doesn't even know that they have an irrigation system. So it's an educational process.
Well, they're talking about irrigation. There is a state ordinance that prohibits waste of water. And I'm referencing Dillon's on Planet. They have a leak in their irrigation system, and it's deteriorating the asphalt. I'm surprised they're not aware of that.
Yeah, you think their water bill would make them aware of that, but.
And speaking of landscaping, on a more positive note, when do we make recommendations for landscaping awards?
At any time that you feel so moved, we generally do the awards in October, but we much prefer to have commissioners drive around and make their recommendations than for staff to try to generate that list. So if you have thoughts, the only one that Dustin and I have identified to date on the staff level is that the plan and the execution out at the new Aldi store worked out really well. That's a very attractive, what they've done there, and it's been maintained.
I can email them, but
Okay.
Exchange Bank has done an incredible job of, and it's a large parcel, and I'm sure it was a great expense, and there's sidewalk, there's brilliant landscaping, but there's a number of projects out there that I've noticed
Yeah.
recently.
The other thing that the Planning Commission, we added, so that we didn't limit it just to landscaping alone, is that we created a curb appeal category as well. There may be some cases where a business goes in and substantially rehabs or enhances the appearance of a building that may not have involved landscaping, and so if you see one of those and you want to bring it to our attention, that is eligible as well.
Maybe Old Chicago would fit that category.
So commissioners, please forward that information to staff if you have
And we
any ideas.
also don't want to exclude residential curb appeal awards. So if someone has, in a particular neighborhood, has done a house rehabilitation or done some outstanding streetscape or yard work that has really upgraded a residential property, we want to recognize those as well.
Talking about that, what's happening with the property on Highland and where the vultures roost?
Oh, the
Prescott. The Foley
Prescott
House?
House?
Yeah.
Prescott Foley House. Well, we've had some interesting situation there where it has never properly legally licensed as a bed and breakfast or anything but a single-family residence. And so we had a purchaser of that property that had purchased, they lived in Canada, and they were trying to manage the property from Canada by having it as an event center and things like that, and it's not set up for that, both interior, exterior. And so we met with them and explained that there would be a process they would go through that would also involve neighbors and probably involve this commission and all to transition that if it was going to go from anything but a single-family dwelling. So as far as I know, the owner in Canada has put the property on the market for sale, and I'm not aware of any change in ownership.
The for sale sign is down now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no longer for sale. They're retaining ownership of it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just, when it was advertised, and it was advertised as a bed and breakfast slash, in the real estate listing, I did contact the realtor that had it listed and explained to them that it was not a bed and breakfast or a licensed bed and breakfast. It was a single-family residence, and that's what it's zoned for. And if the owner wants to convert it into another use, then they'll probably be coming before this body to discuss their plans. But as it is zoned, it is a single-family residence. So we certainly, like I said, if you drive around the community and you have something that you think is worthy of recognition, we much prefer that you generate the list, since it's your awards and not ours. So
Excellent, excellent. And one last question. The Beverly property, is that a commercial property or residential?
it is currently a residential property, and it is being requested to change to commercial C6. And we do have a zoning sign out in the front yard, so if you drive by, you should make note of it. It's on the north side of Beverly. It backs up to some other commercial properties.
Thank you, thank you.
This particular owner applicant has also purchased the former mobile home park on the south side of Cloud, west of Broadway, and they're looking at different options for redeveloping that. But when I met with them, they wanted to move forward with their Beverly Drive project first, but they are looking at zoning changes to transition that former manufactured home park to some higher and better use, and that will, when the time comes, that will come before this body as well.
Perfect. Anything else? Not. Can I have a,
Yeah,
Mr.
all we say the same thing to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If there's a previous case that you've dealt with, or you're around the community and you wonder what the status is of this project or that project or something that you've seen, unfinished business is the perfect time just to bring your list of questions or whatever up, and you want staff to provide an answer or look into something or whatever happened to such and such, please bring those to the meeting and we'll follow up.
And that is a good reason for people to retain seats. So, Mr. Linkwitz, I'd certainly urge you to consider
Want me
that.
back, okay.
Well,
I'll keep that in mind.
trust me, I'm in my second term, and you continue to learn, and you use the experience you've had, and I think it's beneficial to the process.
Especially for guys that has much experience, it's a good deal for you.
Thanks.
Yes.
We don't know if we can teach Mr. Story anything. But
No. Mr. Story already knows
He knows
everything.
everything, yeah.
Yeah, he is the resident expert. We are disgraced with his presence, or have been.
I actually would like to make a recommendation. It just occurred to me. Those two apartment buildings on East Iron, I believe one's called the Norton. And obviously it's an unfinished project, but you can look at it and tell it's going to go a good direction and hopefully change the dynamic of that intersection in terms of the clientele.
Yes. So even that, or the Mr. Richardson's project at the northeast corner, you've seen that develop. You know, you had to use your imagination for what you thought it might turn out to be. But those are the kind of things, if they're neighborhood changers or corner changers or whatever, those are the kind of things we want to. And our Heritage Commission just gave out, I think, was it 5, John? So they gave 5 historic preservation awards at their last meeting, where they wanted to give recognition to people who had rehabbed buildings or residences in our historic districts. So those are the kind of things that, if you think something is a neighborhood changer or corner changer, those are the kind of things that we want to brought to our attention. So you can give them recognition.
Is the city taking out some houses that are pretty dilapidated and that sort of thing now, are you?
Well, we have a dangerous structures. Probably the most recent, I think, at the start of this year, we had a public hearing on a rezoning it was actually to go to a planned development district at 622 South 9th Street. And the owner went in a different direction, and now that dwelling has been demolished instead of converted. So that was damaged by fire. And so we have probably a half a dozen where they get so deteriorated that we declare them to be dangerous structures, and then we either have the owners or if necessary, the city orders it to be demolished if it's just not repairable.
Or that one on northwest corner of South and South 9th, it looks a little about ready to fall down, and I drive by there.
There was a house there right on the corner, and that was demolished within the past couple years. And so that's another thing. You can bring us the bad as well as the good. So if you have a building or dwelling you think is falling down or roof collapsing or things like that, you can bring those to our attention as well.
Thank you. Anything else? Not. Could I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll do that.
Mr. Story, second?
Second.
Oh. Ms. Eisenhower, we're adjourned.